Hi guys, welcome to today's video. So today's video is going to be about the sun and moon kitsunes. So these two little ones that are now available in my shop. They do come as a set, but you can buy them individually. So this is the moon and this is the sun. I decided not to give them names, just sun and moon. And they are available at a cheaper price for the pair. But if you're buying them individually, they'll be normal price. So this video is going to be how I made the sun kitsune, and the next week's video is going to be how I made the moon kitsune. So he has a nice gradient tone on his fur, and they sort of supposed to stand like that, or like that, however you want. So they are supposed to come as a set. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to give that option of individual as well. And payment plans are also welcome if you are looking at buying both of them. I know not everyone has that amount of money to spend, so I'm always open to payment plans on anything, and just message me about it and I can explain you the details. So if you want to see how I made them, then stay tuned.
Alright, so I'm starting off with a resin cast of a sculpture I sculpted out of monster clay, moulded in silicone and then cast in resin. This one is based off a Japanese no mask, and what I'm doing now is I'm just, because this mask is going to be white, I am going to paint it white, even though the resin is white, but it's not always like a solid white. Sometimes it's a creamy white, sometimes it's more of a yellowy colour. It just depends on what the resin colour is at that point in time. So I always like to go over with a couple of layers of paint when I'm doing white, and I'm using a Chromacryl branded acrylic paint. It's water based, it's nothing special, I just get it from my local craft store. I think it's Melbourne Artist Supplies that I get it from, but you can get it from anywhere in your local area. So once it's dry, I'm then going to go and paint in very, very carefully the inner eye of the eye. I'm going to paint it black. And I like to use a fine tip brush for this. It's kind of difficult for me because I don't always have a good steady hand, and at this point I didn't really have a great steady hand. So this was a little bit difficult for me. I don't know why. Sometimes it just have an off day and your hand's not steady. Other times I've got a really steady hand, but this particular day I didn't. So you could always clean it up with paint once it's dry as well, of the other colour. But if I find if it's too unsteady, then I'll stop and try maybe a couple of hours later or maybe the next day, and see if I'm happy with the way it's going around. And apologies for my fat head getting in the way of the painting. That's my concentration head. And the same deal with the nose and the mouth area. I have little sculpted out bits for the paint to go in. They're very, very shallow, but it gives you a nice little channel to put the paint into. And then I leave this to dry overnight, or just dry for a couple of hours, and then I can start painting all the rest of it. As this is the sun kitsune, I am doing a sun in the middle of the head. I did a moon in the middle of the moon kitsune's head. So I tried doing it on a ball-shaped tool, but that didn't really turn out as good as I thought it would turn out. So I decided to go with a brush and just sort of make a circle in the middle of the head. I'm using a paint called Lumiere by Jacquard. They're really, really great metallic paints. I highly recommend you try them if you're looking for a good quality metallic paint. Like I said, I get my stuff from Melbourne Artist Supplies here in Australia, but I'm not sure where you can find them overseas. You can probably find them online and find some stockists somewhere, but I really highly recommend these paints. They're really great quality, and in Australia they're like $9-10 a pot, but they last a long time. I've never bought another one of any colour that I had. Moving on to the markings. So I wanted the sun and moon one to be different have sort of different markings but very similar. This moon kitsune I wanted to have red markings, and the moon will have blue markings. And I went right around the eye for this for the sun kitsune using a very fine tip brush, and I'm using a different type of paint again. This is golden paint. I like to use these golden paints for any kitsune markings that I do, because it's a little bit thicker and it dries a little bit differently and gives a bit of texture rather than the chroma acryls dry very smoothly, and this also leaves a little bit of gloss as well. So I wanted to have more of a lacquered sort of painted look to this to these two kitsunes, and I opted for the golden paint. I wouldn't really recommend using golden paint for anything else, just because it's more of a canvas paint rather than painting things on resin, unless you're trying to achieve a certain look like I was here, then they're perfect for that reason. I painted my resin hanya mask in this red paint, and I'm not sure whether the resin didn't agree with it or the paint didn't agree with the resin, but something wasn't really right there. So I ended up keeping that hanya mask because I couldn't really get the paint to stick properly and it'll go all gummy. Don't know what that was, never know. I might have another go at it and see if I can fix what's going on, but it might be some resin that's leaching through something. Anyway, I've added 2 marks on the cheeks, and I think I'm done with that painting for the sun kitsune. Moving on to the feet. So the feet, I used 2 different types of feet for this. I used my squirrel hands for the front feet, and I used my fox feet for the back feet, mainly because I wanted these to sort of stand up a bit more and have more hands instead of paws, and that sort of stems from Princess Mononoke. I can never say that properly without putting on a weird voice. And the Night Walker, I kind of wanted to do something similar to that, so also on being able to walk on all 4s and on 2 legs as well. Moving on to the fur. So this fur, I'm doing Mongolian faux fur, and I had some people complain about the style of the fur, that they just wanted to brush it on my wolf that I made previously, but this is the style of the fur. There's no point brushing it out. If you wanted smooth fur, I'd use just plain, straight, white fur, but I quite like the look of Mongolian faux fur. I like the messy look of it, so that's why I use this fur a lot. But each to their own, I guess, but I won't ever be brushing this out. But anyway, I drew on some patterns of a fox body that I've made. I have a pattern body pattern video going up on my Patreon very, very soon. That's for my $5 and up pledges. So you can head over there if you want to find out some body tips. I talk about that in the next video, and there's heaps of other videos up there as well. So that's a little look at the fur that I'm using. So right now I am cutting the tail, just trimming the edges off it and neatening it up a little bit. I will be hand sewing this. I think most of it will be hand sewing the tail, just because it's a smaller tail. It's kind of hard to flip through once you've sewn it on the sewing machine. And I'm using a small pair of sharp scissors to cut the body out. I like to use small scissors for this, but you can use anything you want. I probably wouldn't recommend using a knife because it doesn't really cut properly and ends up sort of stretching the backing of the fabric and splintering it out, if that makes sense. So I highly recommend using a small pair of scissors. So once I've cut everything out, I give it a bit of a clean up by removing all the excess pile that have come off during the cutting process, and then I pin it first side together, and I'll be sewing it up on the sewing machine this time. I have a Brother sewing machine. It's nothing special. It's pretty old. I'm going to say maybe 10 to 15 years old, but it does job and I haven't had a problem with it. Sometimes it struggles to get through the thicker faux fur, but I think any at-home sewing machine would struggle with that. The motor's just not powerful enough to get through things that are that thick, so that would mean you move on to something a bit more industrial, but I don't want an industrial sewing machine. So I'll continue using this one for now, and I just use a straight stitch and sew around the outside, leaving maybe a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. for the bits that I sew up, and it's always a good idea to get some thread that is good quality as well. So once it's all sewn up, I cut around the outside on that seam allowance just to give the fabric a bit more stretch. I can talk about this if you are unsure what I'm doing, and it might make it a Patreon video. But let me know any questions you want to know about that process. Anyway, so this is what we've had once we've sewn it all up, and now it's ready to be flipped through. As you can see, I've left the back end open so I can get it the right way around with ease, and I've left the legs open as well so I can push that fabric through on itself. If you sew it up, it's almost impossible to get it through. So this is what we have once I've pushed it all through. Just a note to use a blunt wooden tool. That will help you a lot to get your fabric through. Don't use metal because it will break your fabric and rip it, and you'll end up having to sew it up anyway. So this is what it would look like. It's coming together. Alright, so once that's done, I can move on to making the armature. I have a armature making tutorial in my shop as well, if it's something that you're interested in. And once I've made it up, I use aluminium for these wire armatures, but I also use ball and socket armatures, just depending on what type of doll that I'm doing. So once it's done, I feed it through the body, and then I can start gluing things and sewing things together. So I usually start off by gluing the neck area to the head, just to secure a position down, and then I can start working around it and adding any polyfill to it as well. And I just use a tacky fabric glue, nothing special. It's the same glue that I've been using for ages. I get that from Spotlight here in Australia, but I'm sure you can find something comparable in your local craft store. And I usually leave it to dry overnight before I start adding any polyfill, just to make sure the glue has adhered to the resin properly and I won't break the fabric off the resin, because then you'll have to re-glue it. So once it's done, I can start shoving in some polyfill, and polyfill is just a material, like a little filler that you find in pillows and stuff. I have a video on my channel if you want to know a little bit more about polyfill, but that's what I use, and there's many different things you can use to stuff your dolls, but I just use some polyfill. Moving on to sewing things up. So once I'm happy, I start sewing everything up, and I use a ladder stitch for hand sewing things together. I kind of hate hand sewing. I don't like sewing, full stop. Don't know why. I don't hate it, but I just rather not do it. But it's kind of an integral part of doll making. But anyway, I use a thread by Gutermann. I highly recommend their threads. It's a lot stronger than cheaper thread, and it will really save you when you have to put pressure on the thread, because cheaper ones tend to snap a lot easier. And once it's sewn up, again, I just load up the area with the tacky fabric glue and put the fabric over the resin and wait for it to dry. So after everything's glued and sewn up, I can start giving it a trim, and I will start cleaning up any of the paint job that I might have scuffed or anything in the process, and then I can start taking some photos. So like I said, these two are available in my shop at creaturesofnat.com. If you're interested, again, the pair comes in at a cheaper price, and then the singular ones will be at a full price. But I'd like to thank my patrons for the support again. I really do appreciate it. And don't forget, patrons have first dibs on any work that I will put into my shop. So if you want first dibs on things, you can pledge for as little as $2 and you get first dibs on any of my work. And if you want more, for $5, you can get heaps of videos and you'll get access to all of my previous videos as well. Just depends on what you want. But in the meantime, I also have an Instagram and Facebook. That's at Creatures of Nat that you can check out, and my shop at creaturesofnat.com, and you can find lots of things in my shop there for sale. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.